Grateful always for those of you who tune in on YouTube. And thank you again for those of you who are here in person. Blessings on you that are here as family members especially, and also any new patients and anybody watching the live stream. Great to be with you this morning. I feel like not too long ago I confessed that I'm a sci-fi nerd. I'm going to elaborate on that for a moment and confess that pretty much all of my life I have followed the Star Trek franchise. So never went to a convention or wore a uniform, but I have my limits. But I think I've pretty much sampled every one of the offerings in that long tradition. And I only have one I would like, but otherwise I'm just such a nerdy fan, it's embarrassing. And the reason I tell you that is that as I was preparing for the message this week on the subject of honesty, I was reminded of, so in one of these, they call these spin-offs, so in the spin-off called Picard, which follows the aging Patrick Stewart, who plays this amazing character of now Admiral Picard, near the end of his career, but still saving the universe episode after episode. Picard goes to a planet, I don't remember the name of it, but and connects with a small religious militaristic sect of female warriors that are Romulans, like anti-Vulcans. But so these are pointy-eared women who are badass and trained in martial arts and frightful. And they're called the Kuwat Milat, I think. And this particular sect of militaristic female Romulan warriors were introduced to in that they have a code. And their code is a code of absolute candor. So if you are one of these frightful beings who has taken this vow, you must speak truth. And it's an interesting ideal. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but then I did more research and I found out there's a guy named Brad Blanton. I don't know if any of you have come across this, but in like 20 or more years ago, he published a book that was called Radical Honesty. And in this, he promotes this idea that we can, as human beings, we could pursue like no filter, just like go for it. And I see somebody like, I don't know, because that's the correct response. My point is going to be that kind of brutal frankness is not what I'm talking about. And I think I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous a number of things, one of which is I'm not really responsible for the very first thought. I should learn to be compassionate with myself if, for example, I think, I would like a drink, for example. Or I want to say something that clearly is inappropriate, which happens to me all the time. And you don't have a mind that does that ever, right? And that does not necessarily mean I'm dishonest if I elect not to blab without any sort of screening of the things that pop in my mind, because human beings can think and feel contradictory things at the same time. So if I were to say, for example, I don't know, I didn't think of any good example, but you know what I'm saying. If something blurts out of my mouth and it's the first thought and I haven't stopped, I might at the same time want to follow it, but I'm not really, so my wife says, do you like the dress? And I'm like, what? And careful, right? So, hi honey. Because we can be ambivalent, that's the technical word, we can think and feel things that may not be entirely in harmony with each other at the same time. There is room within the heart of this message. I've decided to point to the word authenticity because I think that's an upgrade from what I'm talking about. What I'm asking is for us to examine as ourselves and myself, do I lead an authentic life? Am I masking or inauthentic? In other words, is there a way in which I'm either a fake or I keep some piece of me hidden, and probably many of us do, especially in certain settings. But is that significant to sobriety is sort of the deeper question, and I'm going to claim it is. In fact, I think it's a really, really important thing. So, a story that I feel moved to share in my journey, which I often reference, out of atheism and into pursuit of a religious profession, chaplaincy today, one of the stopping points was 15 years of congregational ministry. So I was already sober, and I was ordained in a certain tradition, and I served as a church pastor, tiny little churches and then big churches, and then I became Caron's understudy to the Father Bill, and then now I'm the lead chaplain here. So that's kind of my professional career narrative after leaving my secular job. And at one point, all through that time I was married in my first marriage, and now I'm in my second marriage, so no, there's a period of time between marriage number one and marriage number two where I was the divorced, unmarried person. But the story I'm going to tell is well into the congregational leadership and well into the first marriage. And I'm trying to make sure, I don't know how there are details, I'm sort of filling in the details, but my recollection is that I'm talking about a Christmas Eve, maybe 2006 kind of era. And I thought of myself as tremendously important, and I loved the role, to be honest. I was scheduled to preside at 4 different services for this one church that evening. And I asked my now deceased ex-wife if she would attend at least one of the services. And so we negotiated, and she decided to come either to like the 7:30 or the 9 o'clock, I don't remember which one. And so there was like an earlier one, and then there was like a midnight service. And so we're at one of the 2 main services. And this woman is no longer living, but she and I divorced before she passed away. So the truth was I had to ask her if she would even come, because she was fed up with the church and with me and with us. And I had my resentments too. I was less than an ideal husband in my first marriage. I strive one day at a time to do a way better job of it with my bride today. Too much information here. Okay. Well, I'm taking, I thought about this a lot, and I decided that I would be authentic with you here to make the point. So that night, the church's tradition was that I would sit in a vaulted chair as a presider. But I decided instead to sit where Marty's sitting, like sit in the front row with my wife next to me, as a move, not just of like getting myself out of the like grand poobah spot, but to like, since she was coming, I would meet her where she was. And then when I needed to stand up to the mic, I would get up, and I'd get down, get up, get down, get up, get down. So at some point in the service, and I don't remember to what extent this was genuine or feigned, but I put my arm around her. I'd love to think it was Christmas Eve and it was a purely genuine, moment of fraternity and intimacy. But I just know that we were in a really bad time. Later before the New Year, like in the week in between Christmas and New Year's, which is a week in the life of a church person, I was in the office, and somebody who had been at that service said of myself and my now deceased ex-wife, "You two are such a lovely couple. I was at Christmas Eve and I saw you sitting with your arm around her shoulder." That moment I've never forgotten, because it did something, it was like a really bad thing. I was this close to absolute candor, which is sort of funny, but I was ready to just go, you have no idea. And you people are part of the problem here. But I wasn't going to do that. I couldn't break roll and get radically honest and say, ah! But now let's say it's 2006, so it's 17 years later. I've drawn some lessons from this, one of which is to conduct my personal life very, very differently. And another is to conduct my professional life very differently. Because here's what I had wrong. I was looking for intimacy and approval in the wrong population. I was asking for the church to be my warm, fuzzy, you're so good at what you do, we love you, at the expense of a woman who had dedicated her life to being my mutual support. Big mistake, huge mistake. It meant various things, one of which meant when I wanted to get nurturance and intimacy from her, the resentment that she was naturally feeling made it very difficult for her to be the person who I might have needed. And then that, of course, it's like this domino effect. That made me run back to the church and like, we love me, we love me, we love me. Like, I'm so embarrassed to tell you this truth, but it's the truth. So, in the project of authenticity, two things I wanted to say. One is, what happens when we are inauthentic, like I was that day with the person who said, oh, you look so lovely with your wife, is I felt shame. If I were really be honest, I wasn't just angry at them, but I was embarrassed. Yeah. I was reluctant to admit to myself how awful I felt about the state that my life had gotten to. I was broken in a very real way. Within a year and a half, that whole job would crumble and I would end up here, not in treatment, but coming as a chaplain, which was dicey. I might have needed to be here. But thank goodness I stayed sober through this whole period. When a person is keeping a big secret from the people who they are also looking to be their love and support, there is a profound loneliness and shame. I feel like that's just obvious, but I want to say it again to make sure you're getting the point. You have a group of people that are your support. They're your peeps. They're your dogs. They're your folk. They're your kin. And they don't know something that you know, and yet you are wanting to drink at the well of the belonging that we all need. Human beings need to have kin. We need to have belonging. And when we try to experience that from someone who is going to give us back affirmation and love, but we know they don't know X, it doesn't work. You can't experience, you're not getting the real bennies of the affirmation from the very people that you're seeking it from. And so you become profoundly disconnected, isolated, miserable, alone. And this is the precondition in my mind for addiction if it's not already present. And this is fuel on the fire of addiction that's there. Because all of a sudden, the dope, the weed, the alcohol, the gambling, God, there's so many gambling ads in Pennsylvania, I'm being so angry about it. And the paid sex worker and the Cheetos and the whatever all masquerade as feel-good options. When you don't feel good, when you try to feel good. You try to feel good by having somebody like, will you please love me? And then they're like, we love you. And then like, but you wouldn't love me if you knew what I'm not telling you. That's like the unsustainable moment at which a person then is like, I'm fine, really, I'm good. And I speak this from my own experience, but also because I come here day after day, week after week, and I sit with you, and you put your arms around each other, and you look nice, and you're like, I'm good, but you're in treatment, people. Like, it's not all okay. And it's important to get, like, it's okay to not be okay. And until that mask comes down and somebody falls apart, I'm like, we're just at this like game of ping pong of waiting for reality to break. And there's a corresponding truth about that for families. There's a looking goodness and all this. It's the looking good families, an old theme in addiction recovery circles that goes back decades because it's a part of the syndrome. It's an acting as if that human beings do. We do it all the time. I mean, I think in war zones or whatever, you find people still getting together and saying their evening prayers and trying to have a meal because it's a survival mechanism for sure. But what's of great concern is the starvation of the soul, which depends upon this nurturance that comes from healthy intimacy. And I think we're in an upside-down society where we're being told that on X and Snapchat and Facebook or whatever, you can get intimacy needs met, which is a lie. And we're failing to remind one another that it's a small group of people and the faith in a God beyond our understanding that are the two best ways in which human beings meet this need. And I think you can do one of those without the other, but optimally, in some sense, there's both. And I say faith in a God beyond our understanding because I'm trying to leave a big umbrella there. But a faith just in a world that has enough about it that makes sense that you can place trust and reliance in synchronicity or the flows of the universe to deliver some of the needs that you have. And that's hard to keep up. It's hard to trust one another in small circles, and it's hard to trust in the universe or in God. But if we stop trusting in the universe and God and stop being authentic in the universe and God and in the small group of people that we need to love one another, we are at tremendous risk of this deprivation, addiction, ricochet. And so do you have to be honest in every... No! But the point here, as I've come to realize it for this week, is you need to have a few people from whom you are not dishonest. Or you are alone. Period. End of story. And if those people are not safe people, or you're holding some big secret, my first recommendation is disclose in the circle that you want. Pick a circle that you're going to try and trust, and then let them know the truth. Like, if it's that you're gay, I'm gay, and watch and see what happens. Because if you have been trying to get love from a group of people and they didn't know you were gay, well, then they either need to love you as you're gay, or if they don't, then they didn't love you before because you weren't letting them have a chance. And then just, as Jesus would say, shake the dust off your feet and go find somebody who will love you as who you are. This is what we need. We need people who will love us as who we are, not as who we think we should be. And then in those contexts, we must find the courage to be who we are and not masquerade. And then we can address the larger public sphere and decide what we're going to tell. I took a risk today to tell you a sad and embarrassing story with a very important strategy, but there are things that, I'm sorry, but I won't tell you about me and about the demise of that marriage and about, yesterday, much less whatever. Because one of my jobs is to maintain professional boundaries. And those are two different things. It doesn't mean I'm a liar, it means I'm sane. And that I understand the risk that's involved. So, not everybody needs to know everything, but some people need to know everything, or I'm at peril of seeking to meet my intimacy deprivation needs out of my shame with an unhealthy substitute. As the Picard story goes on, and we meet a non-female follower of this movement, whose name is Elnor. He's like an adopted stray boy, and he becomes a man, and he's a warrior, follows the creed of absolute candor, and probably has some insecurities about being male among all women, all as women, but he's pretty badass himself. What we start to realize is that there's another part of their code, which is that in a confrontation with an adversary, before the moment of terminating their life, so I've got the sword in your throat, if I'm a Kawat Milat follower, I say, choose to live? Meaning, do you want to change who you are, right? In fact, if you read up on it, the full thing that they would say if they had the time is, the path on which you have conducted your life has come to an end. Do you want a different path? Do you want You want to opt out. And I love that because I am borrowing a Star Trek shirt, but I'm borrowing it for the two reasons. The absolute candor is the one, but also because I would say this to every one of you who comes here as a person around a new episode of treatment, family and patient, is that the path on which you have been traveling is facing an end. Its end is grim. Beyond this are terrible future outcomes. The fentanyl that is in crystal meth? Who told me that this week? And why would you put fentanyl in crystal meth, by the way? It doesn't make any sense at all. Or the various other things it's being laced in. And that's a path to death. Institutions, jails, psychotic episodes after too much weed. It's the next stations on this train are not ones you want to visit. Or will you choose the path to love? And that does require authentic presence. It does require stop the ping pong. Drop the dime on yourself. Live a few safe others. And experience love maybe for the first time in a very long time. Let's be real today. Thank you so much.